I know Kung Fu.
Show me.
You are the new student. Come closer.
You're listening to the Kung Fu Podcast presented by James Still.
I don't care if it's Muhammad, Imard, Bruce Lee.
And Steve Newby.
This is the original Five Fingers of Death right here.
But my hands are registered as lethal weapons. That means we get into a fight, I accidentally kill you, I go to jail.
Right.
Change.
Hang on. So are you googling? Are you cheating? I thought as a master of Kung Fu, you're supposed to know history. What's going on? I want my refund.
There you go.
I want a refund, Steve. I want a refund.
So we got to start again because it's 1636.
Right. 1636 is it? Have you got? Yep. Have you? I'm hearing reverb in my earphones now.
I can't hear anything. I'm fine.
We are recording right now. Gang, welcome to episode 6, I think we're on. Are we on 6? Yeah, episode 6 of the Kung Fu Podcast. And as always, you know, the unrehearsed mess that is. This is your Kung Fu enema of the week, people. yeah, you're in for a treat. You're in for a treat because we're talking history. We're talking history. And the problem is, none of us really know the history. Yeah, as we speak, you're on Google. Okay. What it is, I'm joined. My name's James Still. Welcome to the Kung Fu Podcast. Let's get all the official stuff out of the way. I'm joined as ever by my teacher, Steve Newby. Hi, Steve. How you doing?
Great, thank you. And I'm quarantined in China. In China. Where am I? Canada.
It begins with a C. You were close.
Yeah, I'm quarantined. Well, we're not actually quarantined. We've just been advised not to leave the house unless we need to. I'll be at work tomorrow.
Oh well.
So it's on a training program today. So
yeah.
It's
great.
a big deal.
Oh great. Well, we've had to shut down the Kung Fu classes, haven't we? As of
I've had to close mine as well.
Yeah. So what we late January through March, late March 2020. So we've had to close down for the impending doom. So what I want to do today is, like I said before, we're going to talk about the history, or a version of the history, should we say? Because history is quite contentious, isn't it? There's a lot of opinions. So more specifically, I want to talk about the history of Laogar Kung Fu, the style we both practice, and but what I want to do is I want to go back to sort of the inception of Shaolin. I don't want to focus too much on it, but I just want you, if you could, Steve, to give us your sort of take on the early Kung Fu and how it became and all the rest of it. So, without any further ado, it's on you.
Yeah, well, I'm no history teacher, and I'm well aware that everybody would have a different viewpoint, as we've discussed before. The thing about history is nobody can really... history is largely guessing of what happened in those times. So because we're specifically interested in the martial arts side of it, we're obviously we kind of recognized Shaolin as a foundation, if you like, of the development of Kung Fu, although we can understand that it may well have been fighting arts in a similar way, and certainly in a Chinese kind of culture would have been developing elsewhere as well. We know also that it was an Indian monk, Datmo, or Bodhidharma, as people might know him, who came to to the Shaolin monastery. There's also a very interesting story about that Mo when he left the monastery, which is quite interesting because apparently someone turned up at the monastery and says, "Oh, I've just passed him." You know, apparently he died, and someone says, "Well, I've just passed him in the desert, and he was only wearing one shoe." And now that is a very similar story to the one of Jesus Christ, of course. So. Which is really weird, isn't it? I think
was his name Brian? Was he called Brian?
Yeah, it's the kind of history we get. So yes, history is quite a hit and miss thing for most people.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, obviously there was a revolution between there was Qing or Qing or whatever you want to call it dynasty that overthrew the Ming dynasty.
What what dates are we sort of talking about?
Well,
here?
We're talking that according to Wikipedia or whatever. 1636, Ming control disintegrated and peasant rebels led by a guy called Li Zicheng conquered the capital. Whatever.
You're not reading off Wikipedia.
Of course I'm not. Of course I'm not.
What? So just so we're sort of semi-clear, if it was a movie plot, the Mings would be the good guys, right, and the Qings are the bad guys.
Well, it's hard to say, isn't it? I mean, it's the same as saying, the French are the bad guys and the Angles are the good guys in 1066. I mean, what would have happened if the English would have won? Would we have had the same kind of culture and development that we've got now? So it's really hard to say.
Can I just say though to everybody listening, this is what I've had to put up with for 16 years of asking questions. He doesn't give a straight answer, does he? It's just yes or no. Yes or no, please.
Real politician. I don't know because I weren't there.
Yeah, I know.
All I can say, I can give you a little story from Shaolin, the way that the Qing or Qing dynasty discovered that the Shaolin monks were in support of the old dynasty, because the abbot was actually an uncle of that current Ming emperor, and so he was obviously in support of that, dynasty, if you want.
Yeah.
So basically, there was a lowly monk,
right,
at the monastery who was cleaning the lanterns, and accidentally broke one, and so he was punished.
Right.
And he wasn't very happy about being chastised or punished. So he went off and he let the Qing dynasty people, whoever it was, the officials around that area at the time, that in actual fact the Ming, the Shaolin monastery was in support of the Ming emperor, and so I guess that is how it came to be attacked and destroyed. There were about 18 people outside of the temple looking for supporters and developing revolutionary groups to try to fight back and try to win back the country.
So gaining support and teaching martial arts.
Not necessarily teaching martial arts, but just simply trying to raise support. About 10 of those survived and went on the run from that, and out of those 10, 5 went underground and began their own revolutionary groups against the dynasty. Right. And we know them as the 5 secret sects or 5 ancient sects, and this is how we know from our style, Lao, because Lao was one of the 5, as in Honggar and Ligar, Mokgar, and so on,
and Choigar,
so they were, and Choigar. So they became revolutionary groups underground, and of course they were fighting against the Qing dynasty and trying to overthrow that. It wasn't until much later that they decided that actually the emperor of, the last emperor. You seen the movie?
No, I haven't. No.
Oh, right, it's a really good movie.
Oh, is it?
There was a young emperor who was he was being looked after, if you like. He was being supported by the Empress Dowager, and the Empress Dowager hated the fact that the Europeans were now in China, and she wanted them out, and she set up kind of attacks on them,
Right.
and declared war on them, if you like. Okay. But all the time she was saying, when she was setting up these attacks, she was, blaming the boxers. She was blaming effectively those revolutionaries.
Okay.
She was pretending to have nothing to do with it, and then one time she believed that they'd actually won a battle decisively against the British and Americans and so on, and she then turned around and said, well, no, we want you out, in effect. Right. And it is us after all, and we are, we kind of declaring war on you. There were some interesting simple facts that I remember being told.
Yeah.
There was a junk there, there was a British ship there that basically he sunk 500 junks in one day.
Right.
So they weren't doing so well, let's face it.
Yeah.
And she really believed that they were doing well, and eventually, of course, they lost terribly, and she was found poisoned, and I guess the rest is, as you say, history. Whereas these revolutionary groups, disappeared into the abyss. And,
but they kind of went underground, didn't they? All these.
Yeah, but that's when they started to look after themselves, as opposed to be revolutionaries. Kind of trying to rebuild their country and trying to develop their country and get it away from the white coast. Is it Gwolai? Is it?
White Devils. Yeah.
I always get that wrong. I always get that wrong.
Going back. Can I just?
Gwolai. Yeah.
You're on Wikipedia, doesn't it have one of them audio?
No, I'm not on Wikipedia.
Oh, are you not?
No,
can we just skip back to going back to the 5 ancient sects? So there was a number of survivors of the Shaolin temple that was attacked. We had 5 of them went off and proliferated the martial arts. Lao Hung, Qi, Lloyd,
I guess to cut a long story short, that's exactly what they did.
So when we look at, because the monks of Shaolin did not have names, did they? They were nameless. They would give up everything.
Right. That's right, and that's why history is so hard about this, because they didn't have names. We know that. There was a tea merchant named Hong, and he learned his martial arts through the same process of developing, training from, these monks, or a monk.
Yeah.
And we also know that Lao developed his training from a monk on the run, and they may well have given these monks sanctuary, and so in return these monks taught them.
But we know that Lao was a tiger hunter, don't we?
That's right. By trade he was a tiger hunter. He wasn't a monk, but we honour him as the founder to our style.
But really, he's not the founder per se. He's just the first guy to take the name or to use them.
This is the thing about styles. You see, you have one monk will prefer one way of fighting, whereas another monk may prefer another. Now, there are so many similarities within these 5 sects, Choigar, Ligar, Mokgar, Hungar, Laugar. There are so many similarities to them, and yet there are huge differences as to the performance of them or the preferences of them, and so you'll see Hungar is much lower stances and so on, but he lived on a junk. He had low ceilings. He's going to do an awful lot of training, with very strong low stances, whereas other styles would have been far more flamboyant. I mean, Choigar, Ligar, they tend to be quite big, long, swinging punches, and Laugar tends to be very tight, short techniques, mid-range and close-range fighting, and so you've got all these different changes to, or directions, if you like, that the Shaolin martial arts kind of diversified into these different and lived on through these different avenues, and they are different, and obviously some were more successful than others. Choi and Ligar kind of, maybe they survived somewhere with one master or instructor of another, but we only know them now as Choi Li Foot, because where the two of them were connected by a guy who honoured his teacher, whose name was Foot, and it became Choi Li Foot. So that becomes another style, and
but
so
also
many others diversified.
Yeah, but with Hungar as well, you'll find some Lao mentioned sort of in some of the sets, wouldn't you? Like
exactly
in the Hungar sets.
Yeah, and I think you'll find the style, a lot of the techniques will be similar, but the strategies will probably be different.
Yes.
And the tactics will be different because of the settings that they trained in, and because of the environments they were in, and because of the people that developed them, and possibly their builds and choices of lifestyle. So you're going to have and that's what makes a style, you see, all these different things.
Yeah.
And if you look at the history of Wing Chun as well, and Wing Chun is a nun from the temple. Now, was she on the run from a temple, or was she just simply a nun who happened to see a woman who was in distress and offered to teach her within a year and she taught her the pushing hands and basically she honoured it as Wing Chun, because the nun's name was 5 Stars, or Nwai, and they knew who they honour as a style, Beautiful Springtime,
Wing Chun.
Is Wing Chun. So is that has a similar kind of history, but we don't know how, we don't know the details of these histories. We only follow them as the basis to the history of our styles as we develop our styles. So, and to be honest with you, the history doesn't make a huge amount of difference to the style in the future. Although it's important to understand that history, it's not so important to know. It
doesn't make you any more proficient, does it?
No, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say, I guess. And you will have better history with one lineage, if you like, or one direction and one style, than you will with another. And we do know, we because of the fact that they don't really sort of talk that much about history previous to their own teacher, we know that very quickly we lose the name of the previous teacher of their teacher. So you have, in our history, of course, we have Wan Gun Wing, and Hoi Ching was the first one, then Wan Gun Wing, but they both taught my teacher's grandfather, and so
what we're kind of getting at now, what we're kind of getting at now,
sorry, I was going to say,
is that from the time of the destruction of the Shaolin to a monk meeting a guy called Lao, who was a tiger hunter, and teaching him, the style, if you like. There's a big gap. There's a lot of stuff missing there, isn't there? Through to sort of the modern history, and why would that be? Why wouldn't it have been documented in any way?
Well, most of them couldn't write. Have you ever tried writing Chinese, James?
Listen, you can't cut me some slack here. I'm having to answer these questions. Of course,
25,000 characters, James. We got 26 letters. Come on. It's an art to write Chinese. So I think a lot of them didn't write. I mean, they may well have done, but they may well have. I mean, it's quite secretive, isn't it? And a lot of the time they may not have written things down because they didn't want it to be known by anyone else. Master Hours always had this attitude that you don't watch videos, you don't read books, you come and train. And that's basically, I think, the same kind of attitude they may well have had. Why should he, do a video? Why it took him years to do a video, and then in the end someone else ended up doing it, and the rest is history.
Hang on, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
So we've got this big chunk of sort of this vacuum in the history of it, because quite frankly it wasn't documented. People weren't illiterate, were illiterate rather. They so a lot of it was passed.
I'm only suggesting that's one of the reasons.
Okay, all right.
I'm not going to blame them for being illiterate.
No, I'm not saying. No, I'm not saying that. We've got to kind of acknowledge why we're missing a sort of considerable chunk of the history of what we know.
I think you've got to understand Chinese culture as well, because often, people would name their sons by the same name and so on, and when the Westerners arrived, they thought they were living to like 250 because it's the same guy, but it isn't the same guy. It would have been his son and so on. And the other thing, of course, that threw them is a Chinese century is actually 60 years. It's not 100 years, and this is a misconception as well from the early Westerners that went to China. They didn't realize that at the time, and of course as time went by, them going, wait a minute, this guy, you look well for your age. So they were believing that these guys lived forever, and that's why you see them in these movies. They're really old and able to throw this energy out and throw you through a wall without even moving or touching you. And this is the kind of the legends and
so is it
mystical things that happen.
So going back to this period of the unknown history of, because I want, we're talking about Lao, of course we can't not mention the beginnings. So coming into the point of the modern history of Laogar as a style, how far back do we actually know, or is not speculated on? How far back can we go?
Only as far as Master Yao is willing to tell us.
Right.
And I have seen Lao mentioned in books and said that it's lost in history and so on, which is why in the Americas you get a lot of Hongar styles, but with a little bit of Lao thrown in, which doesn't even look like Lao, simply because of the fact that it's come from a completely different source, if you like. But we know the source that we've had, that we learned, and of course we're able to trace that back. And we know that Master Yao's grandfather, Yao Luxao, was 12-ish, 12 to 13 when he first learned. And the reason he wanted to learn, as the story goes, is that his father went to a market to buy vegetables, was shortchanged basically. The vegetables were weighed wrong, and he knew it, and he complained, and the store holder sort of beat him up or attacked him, and punished him, if you like. And Master Yao's grandfather saw that and thought, that's not going to happen to me. I don't want that to happen to my dad. I'm going to find some way of doing it. So he went out looking for someone to teach him martial arts, and he found Hoi Ching.
Tang Hoi Ching.
Yeah. And so...
And do we know anything about him? Or
no,
not really?
I know nothing about him. I know that he taught Master Yao's grandfather till he was about 19, and then he said, go out and try it out, and so we know that Master Yao's grandfather would have gone out and tested it in the usual way of the challenges of the time, and he was doing quite well. And in fact, he was one of the top 5 masters in Hong Kong at that time. Because
and what time are we talking about
from
here?
Hong Kong.
What time are we really talking about?
Well, it's hard to say, but it would have been around. It would have been around the early part of the 20th century, if you like. 1915, that kind of period. Right. But I can't be sure about that. I'm going by Master Yao's age. Master Yao was born in 1942, October, to my recollection. Again, people can correct me if they want to. And it might have been August. I don't know. Anyway, he he brought up Mastiao because Mastiao's father had died during the Japanese occupation in China at that time in the 30s. So he would have been, by that time fairly old anyway, but he did live through to the 60s and early 70s.
Yeah.
Because he did come to the UK. So Steve Faulkner told me. But I'm not sure if he met him. I'm not sure whether he just heard it as a story. So I'm not sure. I can't confirm whether he lived to the 60s or 70s. But that would have made him, a fair old age.
Haven't you got a picture of Mastiao's grandfather in?
Yes, I've got a picture, and I've also got a picture of the whole family.
Right,
yes,
right. So we're looking at Mastiao's grandfather had 2 teachers. So he learnt from Tang Hoi Ching when he was a youngster.
Yeah.
Presumably the later half of the late 19th century. And
possibly, I don't know.
Possibly.
Well, I'm just going
with this. You don't want to commit, and I understand that. But can we generally?
I can't. I'd love to commit, but I can't. I do not know those. Okay. I'm sure that if I asked Mastiao at the date or the period of the time or his date of birth, I'm sure he would probably give it to you. So
and I appreciate
any Lao practitioners in the BKFA that want to ask Mastiao, go ahead and see. See if he wants to answer you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate I'm putting you on the spot here. But if we could sort of maybe generalise a bit instead of saying every other word, I don't know. And what I mean by that is I understand you don't want to, put out a doctrine.
I can only give you the information that I know.
No,
and
that's fine.
I'm full of little facts that won't link.
Yeah. No, that's.
I know, for instance, that Mastiao's name means golden child, and he was quite
really. That's like the Eddie Murphy movie.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't know that.
And Yao Ganhua, and yes, and that he used to chew the. Suck the fat off the chicken, but he'd throw the chicken away.
Okay.
And they weren't very happy with him about that because he used to get the best bits, and then he'd suck it and then throw it away. And that's I know silly little things like that. And,
okay, all right.
But it's quite it's been a very beautiful and interesting experience to be close to that kind of history.
Yeah.
But you don't ask. You don't impose.
No,
and,
I guess you don't. But
and you just get taught.
Yeah.
And you get given the information.
Yeah.
But the most important thing to get is the martial art, and that really. And I guess I'm looking at it in the same way that perhaps the people in long gone by saw it with their teachers, which is why they may not have the information that was available to them. Yeah. Maybe they didn't ask the right questions, and I really wish I had done. I wanted to write a book about it, but I would have had to collaborate constantly, and it would have been a pain in the ass. And I just thought, you know what?
But you did, on many summer courses, you did take your notebook, didn't you? And you wrote down.
Oh yeah, I've got absolutely so many
anecdotes and stuff.
Oh
like that.
Yeah, I've got lots of anecdotes. I used to take my Alsatian dog, Dexter, on the summer courses. I went on 22 summer courses and. Or more, I think, and my dog went on 7 of them, I think.
Right.
And during that time, he was quite well known there every year, and he used to do the running and everything, and people used to get to the end of the run and kind of applaud people as they came in at the end of their run. And of course I was a bit faster than my dog as he was getting a bit older, so I was about 10 minutes ahead of the dog, and then the dog came in and everyone applauded him as well. So it was I got it on video as well. I got it on video of my dog coming in, everybody applauding him as he came in. But the thing is about that, the reason I mention that is because my dog, my Mastiao, he said to me one day, the great dog, he says, I used to have one of them, it tasted delicious.
Oh God!
But it was just one of his jokes because he did.
Yeah.
They used to have 2 dogs that were on top of the house, guard dogs.
Right.
And
Sorry,
he
what
kept
house?
two dogs. In Hong Kong
Oh, right, okay.
is his granddad's house, I guess.
Okay. So going back to trying to go, just I don't want to stray too far off the beaten path here. Just trying to, we're going back to Master Yo's grandfather. He had a son who was killed by the Japanese in World War II. Mm-hmm. So Master Yao was effectively adopted, or
he was brought up by his
grandfather, who at the time did he have an open martial arts school, or was it just taught within the family?
Yes, it was initially it was open. Yes, but then he discovered that some people were kind of messing around with the underworld, if you like,
right?
The criminal world, and so he put a stop to it and closed it. And he would teach only close family then.
Right. Okay.
He was very well known in the community and so on. The whole family was well known actually. Yao started in Hong Kong with there were kind of 2 groups, 2 families on one side, on 2 sides of a road,
right? And
that developed an actual community over the years, over the period of years. That developed a whole community within one district of Hong Kong. They wouldn't sell their property either, so people were building high-rise blocks around them as it was going. So he did have quite a lot. And I'll tell you a story, and this might upset some people, I guess. I don't know, but we're here to please. Yes, I went on to China.
Yeah.
With a big group, and there were some guardians there. We just started the guardian concept, whereas we are there to try to develop and enhance the association, and hopefully for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the opportunity, an amazing opportunity. I spoke to Master Yao. We were on a train for about 8 hours. I went to Master Yao and I talked to him for a while. And I says, when we get to Hong Kong, I would really love to visit your grandfather's grave.
Right.
And it was a great opportunity. He says, well, I can't take everybody, but I am willing to take the guardians.
Yeah.
So then I went around every single guardian about talking to them about the possibility of going to visit the grandfather's grave, and they all was up for it. They all loved the idea and so on, with the exception John Russell, who's now master in waiting the association, and they call him the master, and they now then start to call Master Yao Grandmaster. Anyway, but John had a problem with his leg and wasn't going to be able to make it, so he told me there and then he's not going to be able to make it. But the others were all up for it, but when we got to Hong Kong, of course, I was all ready and everything. Got me big machete. not really. At least I had my shorts and me hat with the corks on it.
Your fedora.
Yeah. And I came down to breakfast, and Jason Crabtree says to me, it's no one's going. And I went, so why not? Such and such has got to do this. And I'm not going to name people, but one person said he's got to get glasses fitted. Another person said he's having a suit done, ironically, for the Guardian 30 years celebration.
Yeah.
And another guy said he can't make it, he's packing, whatever. Yeah. So that kind of struck a chord with me and has lived with me forever. The one time that the Guardians, anybody for that matter, had the opportunity to pay respects to Master Yao's grandfather and the lineage of the style, if you like, and they'd rather have their glasses fitted, and they'd rather have a suit done, and so it was cancelled.
Wow.
And that will live with me forever, because that is something that will never happen again.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame.
Right.
But life goes on, but that's when I discovered that I actually was very, very loyal. and I think people sometimes look at loyalty and have loyalty in all sorts of directions, but not always the right one.
Yeah, right.
So but that's just an anecdote that
it's
I'm quite happy to share.
Yeah, well, it does strike a chord with you. Yeah, like you said.
Yeah, it does. It strikes a chord with me. It upsets me a lot about that, because that was one opportunity I had. So when you talk about history, that would have been our history.
Yeah.
That would have been an opportunity to pay respects, because it was going to be hard to find as well. It was going to be hard to get to. It was a fair walk.
Certainly for us training Lao, we do have a picture, don't we, of Master Yao's grandfather, so we know what he looks like, and like the Chinese always like to have the pictures, of the previous masters, so we can sort of honour them. Talk a bit about the training. So Master Yao would have received when he first began studying under his grandfather, Yao Luxan.
I am aware that he started training quite early, and by the time he was 8, he was helping in the class to teach. Right. But during that period, he was forced to sit in the traditional horse stance, and his grandfather would put a bowl of water on his head, and he would come back half hour later to see if there was any splashes on the floor, and if there was, then he'd get a slap. And so it's that kind of training that probably we can't do now. Even if we were capable of it, we can't really perform it. So
I used to do the horse stance in the toilets in McDonald's when I was working.
I know you did, yeah. And John Strangeway, who teaches for me in Missouri in America, he sent me a video saying, this is me doing the horse riding the stance. Can you check it out? And it was, I think it was about 28 minutes long or something. Him just sitting there doing the horse riding stance. And I thought, well done, fantastic. But do you really want me to watch it all? So it's like,
wait for it. 16 minutes, something happens. I twitch. Come on.
So, but that is the kind of training and devotion that John has, and
absolutely.
John now, by the way, is a world-renowned what do you call him? Strongman. That's right. Yeah. He, those kind that pull trucks and lift tires and all that kind of thing. Yeah. He's lifting a couple hundred pounds with his single finger, and which we've got videos of. He's in the top frame of the people now. It doesn't come to mind what it's called, but nevertheless he is in a category that would have took other people years to do, and he's done that. So shout out to John.
Hi John. Big shout out to you. Going back to Master Yao's training, how many hours a day would he have trained, do you think?
Well, traditionally he would have trained from 4 hours a day, really, 7 till 11, after work or after chores or whatever. He would have trained in the evenings, every evening, no holidays, and the only time they would have a holiday is Christmas and New Year.
Well, when you say holiday, you mean time off, right?
A time off, 1 day off, right. And then New Year, of course, they would do lion dances and so on with the class. So
it would have been a very, very. I mean, so I know, some people struggle to make 2 hours in a week to train.
Yeah, it's very rigorous. Yeah,
you can imagine.
And for 14 years as well,
right.
He did that
straight through.
Often there's a lot of people. People will say, but only 14 years. I've trained for 28, or I've trained for 30, or whatever. No, you haven't. Not in the same way.
Yeah.
You may be keen and you may be out there every day or whatever, but you're going to have days off, because today's society, even the advice in training requires you to have a day on, a day off, or 2 days on, 1 day off. You've got to rest the body, otherwise you're going to end up like Olga Corbett and can't walk in a wheelchair because you're training all the time. Do you know where that is, by the way?
No, not a clue. But I was going to sound really, intellectual on our podcast.
She's Olympic.
You had to ask me who it was.
Okay, she's an Olympic athlete.
Right.
She did gymnastics, and she won a lot.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay.
And but now she's a wheelchair ridden. Her hips are just shot and knackered, and a lot of athletes end up like that when they overtrain. And there's one thing to train dedicated and devote all your time to it. There's another time to be sensible, and make sure that you are obviously eating the right things, but also getting the right amount of rest and play.
When you're, I mean, we can only speculate, without actually asking Master Yao, but what sort of, when you say vigorous training, what conjures up, what images and conjure up in your mind of what vigorous training would be? I mean, would they be,
I would suggest the forms and the fighting.
Yeah.
That's basically what you have with Kung Fu in those days. You would train forms, because you can't do pushing hands, or really you can't do the fighting in the specific way the style is meant to be without actually practicing those movements in the first place. Those movements are got to be set to point. They have to be so that when you do a block, that block ends up in exactly where it's supposed to end up, not because you're thinking about it. Because we talked about sticky hands in the last podcast. Sticky hands is about sensitivity, but that sensitivity requires you to an awful lot of practice. And when we talk about sensitivity, I think we didn't mention it before, but maybe we should mention the fact that sticky hands takes away the requirement of seeing something happen. Right. So instead of your eyes seeing something happen and sending a signal to your brain to tell it to send a signal to your muscles to respond, and then they respond, and so on and so forth, all that sort of direction, it's a matter of feeling it and responding it. It's like if you had to do that when you touched a hot stove, you'd always burn your fingers pretty much. But the fact that you get close and you pull your hand back very quickly, that is a stimulus.
Well,
that
they
is
call
a
that
kinesthetic
perception, don't they?
Exactly, kinesthetic
So
perception.
you act without consciously acting.
That's right. Like blinking, it's the same thing as blinking. If a fly comes next to your eye, you don't look at it and go, "Oh, I think I'd better close my eye," and then send a message to your brain to tell you. It just does it. It does it without you thinking. Otherwise, you'd get hit by the fly or anything that was flying your way.
Sure.
So that's called kinesthetic perception, and that's what we should have mentioned last time.
Well, okay. Yeah, no, great addition there. Going back to talking about the sort of the training that Master Yao may have gone through at that time. You mentioned the fighting. Now, I'm under the impression that the fighting, certainly within the very modern history of Laogar, the style has always emphasised, sparring, fighting, over not over anything else, but it's certainly emphasised that the fighting is important. So the kind of fighting that Master Yao would have done back in the day, obviously no pads were worn. What do you think? How do you think it was done? And
well, it's just traditional fighting. It's just there's no holes barred. There's no you can't kick me to the groin. Yes, you can. So bloody cover your groin. You can't punch me in the face. Yes, I can. So cover your face. Remember that competition fighting or you create rules and so on, but it's a tool for promotion when it comes to martial arts. It's simply a tool for promotion. You try to develop, encourage and develop interest in what we do. By making it aesthetically pleasing, and semi-contact fighting is probably one of the most aesthetically pleasing types of fighting styles you can actually do. And when it's made safe, of course it has to be safe in order for people to participate in it, then it lasts longer, so you build an audience as well, and a following. So, and then people of course build reputations on that, but then it's about the tactics that are given to that fighting capability. It's not about necessarily the techniques, because obviously a lot of the techniques are going to be too dangerous, as in any other kind of fighting. They're going to be too dangerous to apply in a team event or in a tournament event. And, you know, you don't want anyone being poked in the eye. You don't want anyone kicked in the groin. You don't want shins kicked and so on. It's just going to slow the fight down.
Yeah.
So you don't want the fight to be slowed down. You want it to be constant.
Right.
And basically that's it. Otherwise, you you may as well take all the equipment off a sword fencer.
Yeah.
And let's see how long that fight lasts. It's just silly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got to be aware that you know, promotion, competitive training, competitive tournament fighting is a promotional tool, and it's an amazing art in itself. No one would doubt that. And that goes for full contact as well, and includes boxing and so on. But it is an entertainment and a promotional tool for people who, you know, obviously want to promote the style in the one sense. But when it comes to professional fighters, there are people there that are going to make an awful lot of money through that promotion anyway. But those are the people that will push it and promote it and keep it going. So you can't kind of take that ideology away from them. You know. But traditional fighting in itself would be totally different, and it would just simply be, you know, the punch is coming, you got to stop it somehow. The kick is coming, you got to stop it somehow. And the fastest way, shortest possible distance, you know, least amount of effort to maintain your ability to fight. And often it would be a kick, you know, coming up to you, and you just put your shin on it, your elbow on it, or you would strike it with your knuckle, and that would prevent them from wanting to kick again. But you would do that with a limited force, obviously, because you've got to look after the people you're training with. If you don't, you have no one to train with. But in those days, they would obviously train harder, and therefore they would no doubt be stronger, and you know, they would definitely take a punch a lot easier, a lot more. So and that's why they had the you know, Dit Da Jiao and so on to make sure that they could heal themselves, because they didn't have the kind of the doctors and the surgery they have today.
So Mastio was training. How long eventually did you say he was training for? About 14 years, did you say? What age would he have been about when he stopped? Sort of mid-20s?
I guess it would have been, well, I don't know. Mid-20s. And he came to the UK in search of work. In Hong Kong, there wasn't a lot of work at the time. It wasn't a great place. You know, they were making all these little plastic dinosaurs.
Well, you were in the Merchant Navy, so you would know.
So they were pretty primitive in their production of stuff, and then they got a lot better later. You know, and became very technically minded. As did the Japanese. You know. And so there was not a lot of work. His family were involved in some way. Some of them in the restaurant trade, and he came to the UK in with work, and he worked in a restaurant for a few years.
Right. So just keep it. We'll bear that in mind. But just going back slightly, Mastio would have eventually come to a conclusion with his training with his grandfather. And am I right in saying his grandfather gave him some tests in order to allow him to teach the style independently of his grandfather? So again, we're talking very sort of a traditional sort of mindset here, and
he would have. He did. He talked about a time when he was put in a room and a wild cat was slapped and thrown at him, and he was to protect himself and you know, without injury to the cat, he had to control the cat, catch the cat as well. You know, how hard is it to catch a cat without it injuring you? Well, especially when it's a feral cat.
Yeah, well, we spoke about this in the first one, didn't we?
That's right. And the another one was where his grandfather, he left him in a dark room, and his grandfather came in with a knife and went at him to try to instill some fear of God into him.
It's an interesting sort of test that. You know, you did.
So there were several things that he mentioned. Some I can't recollect, but very interesting, on a par with the kind of thing that you would have seen traditionally in right back to Shaolin.
Yeah,
I guess. I mean, they wanted to be. You had to be good to survive.
Right.
You know. I mean, the streets are rough, and you know, you had to be good to survive. So, you know, people misunderstand the history of martial arts, where these people that design these styles, there are, you know, we've improved this and improved that, and ours is a really, you know, street smart style and can defend anything in a street. They have no concept or idea of how hard these people trained and how hard they were when it came to fighting in reality with knives and machetes and, you know, big sticks and stuff like that. Even the police used big sticks there.
Yeah.
You know, it's simple as that. I mean, there was a policeman who confronted. It is a story about Yip Man, I believe.
Right.
With Wing Chun, where he confronted him and he didn't know who he was, and Yip Man wouldn't have any of it, so he pulled his gun on him and he took his gun off and gave him a slap. So it's those kind of stories that these people trained.
Yeah, sure.
And I only wish that, you know, that kind of training was available today. Whether I could, even if I was younger, whether I could ever, you know, maintain it.
Yeah.
But our training was excellent. It was a really good style of training, and you know, as I said many times, we would go outside the class and fight, and no pads. It was great fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, you know, when you look at the differences, you know, for better or worse, you know, in this modern day. I mean, not that you can't train damn hard in today's world, but certainly it's a mentality, I think, that and an attitude that you cultivated with hard training like that. Whereas, you know, that sort of training, say, I can only speculate, but if we're talking about sort of training Master Yao had, would have been instilled in him because the attitude would be, listen, you know, I want you to be safe in this world. Whereas today...
Well, no, it was like, if you don't do it, I'll give you a good slap.
Well,
now do it.
Yeah, all right. But sort of what I'm getting at is...
I think that was probably more the option.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is sort of like in today's world, you know, you train hard if you want to be a great athlete or a great fighter or whatever, because we're all more sort of socially matured.
Sedate.
Yeah, or sedate, however you want to say it. Yeah. So going back to Master Yao arriving in the UK, that would have been in the 60s, and he came to the UK for work, and so take it from there. What happened?
Well, he was working in a restaurant, and he had his little instances in the restaurant, as you would imagine in those days with you know, foreigners, Chinese restaurants, Indian restaurants. They probably would have all their, you know, the usual drunk coming in and you know, calling them this, that, and the other. Right. He did have meet someone from Singapore, Bernard Chung, who he then started to teach, and it was Bernard Chung who mentioned that he knew of him when someone went looking for someone to teach a new organisation that they were going to call Bruce Lee's Kung Fu, and you know, the British Kung Fu Association, and the rest is history. It basically developed from there. Yeah. And he turned up to watch the classes, could see the size of the classes, could see the possibilities. Although he didn't want it to be called Lao initially, he kept that for 2 years to himself. Right. But he did change the way in which people perceived Kung Fu, and I always liken his kind of story to that of Bruce Lee, and I'm not trying to put them on a par. I'm not trying to make them similar. I'm just simply saying that the stories kind of are similar.
There's
the stories are similar. Yeah, there are. Yeah, that's it. There are some parallels within those stories, it's quite interesting to me to see that. You know, there were, you know, he in his time that I've known him, he's run a clinic for injuries and so on, and had doctors working for him doing acupuncture and so on. He's also he obviously had the uniforms being made, and so, but he's also owned you know, various other businesses. Yes, he's you know, he's built a very, very good organisation, and everybody within that organisation and without it holds total respect for him. And there are those people that will turn around and say, "Oh, he's fake," and all this kind of thing. How can they, particularly people who have trained for years and years with him, then turn around and tell everybody that he's fake, and they've trained like 10, 15, 20 years with him, and then they've gone off and go, "Oh no, he's fake," and then they try to make their style profess to be real.
Yeah.
Now, how can they possibly do that if all their style is what they've been taught?
Yeah.
Do you see that? That's the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And the worst thing is, of course, how is it possible in the event that it's been proven over and over and over again in competition for 30 years or more? How is it possible that they can then turn around and say, "Oh no, it's not a real style, it doesn't work"?
Yeah.
And this that is a subject we should really go into. These people that create some kind of image for themselves over and above their teacher. That is just totally wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, we will talk about that. So going back, because I want to just get to the crux of sort of like the modern history of Lao, if you like. So we're looking at Master Yao was put in a position where he could, where he was to be a teacher or the head chief instructor, if you like, of the British Kung Fu Association.
Yeah.
What was the social dynamic in terms of martial arts back in because we're talking about 1972 at this point, aren't we? In terms of the structure socially of the people doing martial arts, what kind of people were doing it, and what was about at that time, and where
damn ruffians,
right? Okay, and where did Master Yao sort of fit in, and how did he deal with all that?
Well, he had something to offer, and they could see he had something to offer, and quite frankly, he's not a big guy, and he was able to display and demonstrate and explain things that would make those people better, because a lot of them had come from karate and so on. So there were an awful lot of people that were already fighters that recognised his talents, recognised his knowledge, and took it on board, and and then many people came after that.
I always think that the martial arts are by nature socially diverse and physically diverse. But when you look at the UK back in the early 70s and the kind of people who were training martial arts back then, like I said, a lot of fighters. Now, am I right in saying, or sort of speculating, that the majority of the really good fighters back then were a lot of black guys?
There was a lot of black guys as well,
like Steve Babs, Neville Ray, and stuff like that. And these people really lay the foundations in terms of the styles. What's the word? Reputation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they did, because they kind of fought in a way that they didn't care.
Right.
And they were encouraged to, because we needed to, as a new organisation and a new kind of concept, which Kung Fu, remember, was a new concept in the UK.
Yeah.
It had to prove to the already established karate people that it had something to offer.
Clive Parkinson as well. Parkinson.
Yeah. Humphrey Brooms, all these people. Yeah. But remember, there are also, a lot of white guys, Chinese guys. There was a lot of very, important characters that followed that. I mean, George Shaw is a big name at that time. Steve Faulkner was a big name at that time. Yeah. He was more into breaking. He held the world record for breaking concrete and so on. Yeah. I watched that world record as well. Yeah. And I actually supplied the concrete for him to do another world record.
we delivered it in a lorry or something.
I knew the guy who had a concrete factory, and I got him to sponsor him.
Yeah.
And
I always the reason I'm talking about this social diversity and and the early guys doing the fighting is because I got the impression, like, you watch a lot of kung fu films from China, right? Sort of, you know, because it was in the kung fu boom, like the early 70s and that. And you get the impression that a lot of these kung fu films, not the impression, it's blatantly on the film, that it's about the Chinese being the lowly, sort of the weak race, but because they knew kung fu, they could fight their waves out of a hole. And you know, you look at a lot of the social problems at the time in the early 70s, sort of casual racism certainly was one of them. And so you had a lot of these black guys, like the early sort of the early stable of Laogar fighters, who really went out there and cemented the reputation, because I always felt that maybe they had a lot of angst and a lot of stuff to prove, if you like.
I guess that might be a way of looking at it, but you've also got to take a look at the diversity of the area that it started, and that is Birmingham, the second city, which was obviously a large ethnic communities of all sorts of ranges. So, you know, yes, I think you're right in the sense that they did have a great opportunity to develop as athletes in the pursuance of fighting, which I would imagine appeals to anybody, especially people who are, you know, maybe angst or whatever. And look at boxers. You know, it's the same kind of thing.
Sort of thing, isn't it?
Working class people with a chip on their shoulder, maybe getting out of that. You know, the stigma of where they are at the moment with lowly jobs and whatever. So I can see that. I can see where you're coming from, and most definitely. But you know, you have to take into account there were an awful lot of people coming together, and the fact that it was successful, in the sense, I guess you can say that Master Yao was neither black nor white. Right. Yes. And therefore, he was popular with both communities, and obviously with Chinese communities and so on. And so yes, he had this draw for both, you know, communities, if you want, and they and made it extremely successful for both of them, because there were some extremely good, you know, fighters in all camps. And they went on to develop areas, and obviously. Never set up in London, and Clive Parkinson set up around Birmingham and Oxford and that sort of area, and Redditch eventually, and so on. And Humphrey Brooms went south, did Southampton and so on.
But
they all moved
I would always
around.
say that these people were sort of the first generation Lao, if you like, in my head. And, you know, so when you look at the training back then, in terms of, so Master Yao kind of inherited an organization. Not inherited, was, you know, asked to teach, but he had inherited a lot of people who'd come from different styles and that. And so he's trying to put them to, he's trying to basically sort of teach the Kung Fu. He's trying to lay the foundation work for the Kung Fu.
He could see.
Go on.
Sorry, I was going to say he could see the fragmentation of what was around at the time. There were no uniforms. There was, you know, few people with any genuine syllabus. So he basically put it together and demanded certain things that would make it a club and make it an organisation. And I'm not sure if they saw initially how it would develop, and I don't think they expected it to last longer than like a boom does, you know, like a skateboarding boom, or you know, like the 80s when snooker became that popular, and so on. And it was a big boom, and everybody thought, well, you know, kung fu fighting, all the big kung fu movies, Bruce Lee's died, just built it all up. They didn't expect an association to last as long as it has, and of course all the, you know, offshoots and the hangers on and the followers and the, you know, the copiers and so on. And of course there were other people that saw this and thought, well, Jesus, that's a good business to be in, you know. And often they, just because they were Chinese, or even some of them pretended to be Chinese, or pretended to be brought up by Chinese, to create this image because they thought, well, if you're Chinese, you're going to be more successful.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
you know, maybe that was the case in those days, but nowadays we recognise that, you know, people are people, no matter where you come from. And
Yeah, sure.
Kung Fu, at the end of the day, has been in this country, in the UK, I should say, because I keep forgetting I'm in Canada. I got to look out. I got to look out the window occasionally and see the mountains.
Yeah, poor you.
And yeah, poor me. And so when you see these, you know, these people, the diversity of everybody that's developing martial arts now, simply, you know, it just exists in the UK, and it exists in Europe, and it exists in the Americas.
Yeah.
It's not a Chinese thing, just the same as gunpowder isn't a Chinese thing anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's a specific Kung Fu has a specific tactic, a specific strategy, and this is what we always talk about, that these martial arts, from the beginnings of the Shaolin monastery and before, and possibly, you know, the other things like Bagua and whatever that was, you know, taught or trained by the emperor and so on. They were not from Shaolin.
Yeah.
You know, and then you have the later Tai Chi and all this.
Yeah.
Yes, these things, particularly the fighting arts of Shaolin, have really become so prolific that everybody now knows them. The only good thing about it is, or the important thing for me, is that they understand the actual science of that martial art. But there are so many people that have developed it into some kind of, you know, stupidity, some kind of, you know, Hu Flung Dong. We call them Hu Flung Dong, Icon Yu, and One Hung Lo. That's how we refer to these styles when they come out with this, you know, well, I want to, you know, I can do this flying back upside down flip kick.
Yeah, I'll never forget the time when I brought all my Inside Kung Fu magazines to the class to show you, and I said, Steve, look at all these, you know, I'm reading this from America, and you just looked at me with a look of disappointment, and I just thought, what have I done? And then reading one of the magazines that night, it was about a guy who was hospitalised. Anyway, he was bedridden or something at home, and you know, this guy's cat used to bring in birds that were still alive and then kill him in front of him while he was in the bed, you know, bedridden. And this guy actually thought that his cat was trying to teach him the secrets of fighting arts of cats, and he developed cat kung fu. And from that article, I never bought another magazine. I thought, cat kung fu, that's me out. I'm gone. Yep. See ya.
Yeah. But, a lot of people were like that, as you know, many articles and many, you know, sort of videos and footage will show you how bad things are. And you know, look at us. We can't be the greatest athletes in the world. It's not about being the greatest athlete in the world. It's what can you offer the greatest athletes in the world? What can you understand? What scientific principle have you learned? And what scientific principle can you, you know, teach? Can you show people? Keep what is true, you know, and keep to the truth. Don't start building bull, because all you're going to end up with a pile of shit. Yeah,
right. Exactly.
That's it. You know.
Great.
You know, I have a saying, James, about this. You know, the higher the guy. In other words, the higher the bullshit, the more of a splash it makes, and the further it goes. You know, just imagine a cow pat. You know, someone that high just dropping it, and that is a lot of martial arts today.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Honestly, in all avenues of martial arts, we you know, it's a shame that people can't come together and say, you know what, we want to make sure that martial arts is true and honest. And the only way we can teach it is to be honest and force people to ask questions, force people to argue. You know, question us and argue, because then they get the truth. And if you hide behind calling yourself Sifu master, you know, whatever they call themselves in other things, you know, then all you're doing is kind of exasperating that situation. Now, I know that sometimes it's not worth giving them too many details, but it's certainly worth giving them the truth. Why am I doing this? Because this is how it works, right? And that's the question, and that's the answer. Make sure we'll now go practice it 1,000 times, and it'll work in different ways. You know, that's really important to me, and I hate it when I watch people doing, you know, basic forms, and then they go, right, what's next? And they haven't even learned that form. And then you see black sashes 4th degree, 5th degree, you know, in demonstrations doing sets, and you look at them and you go, do you even know what you're doing? You're making it look pretty, and you're taking away the metal in it. You know, you're destroying it just because you want to look pretty and be popular.
It's like you said, it's the what's next, what can I get next, what, you know, what can I have to eat next, you know, and it's
and how much is it worth?
Right. When talking about going back to Master Yao and the beginnings of the BKFA, and we were talking about the fighting. Sashes, they were never a Chinese thing, were they? Sort of gradings, stuff like that.
Well, apparently some groups did use a similar kind of thing, but I'm not sure whether that's true or not. I have heard that some martial styles in China did adopt them, simply because maybe they'd seen, maybe it was at a time when they'd seen other martial arts like karate or whatever adopt them, but yeah, they weren't a particularly popular thing initially, and certainly like we've said before, in this country we have the simple 7 belts and then a black belt, and that would have been it, but for the fact that everybody else wanted 4th degrees, 5th degrees, 10th degrees, and so you ended up having to go, well, you know, I better get another grade. And so on. But then you have other styles who go, wait a minute, we'll do 1 grade, then we'll grade you again, but we'll just give you a little piece of tape. And then we'll grade you again and give you another piece of tape until you've got lots of bits of tape on your belt. Then we'll give you a different coloured belt, and then you'll start on those bits of tape again all the way around your belt. And so they're making so much money from parents, because usually it's the kids. That and you know, if it's adults, then they should be ashamed of themselves.
I mean, the reason for the syllabus in Laogar, what we have in terms of, we have a method, we have certain requirements to pass certain sash levels, all sash levels. The reason for this syllabus and the way it was designed, I would speculate that it's simply because you're not going to be training at a great you're not training as hard as you would back in the day, so to speak. So you're going to need some instant ideas of how the forms would work, hence the hand blocks and kick blocks.
You're talking about hand blocks, kick blocks, and so on, which would have been introduced, to give reward, really, and to give some kind of speculative, some scenario, something that you could actually recognise and
like
apply.
fast food. So you get given that. That's how I can use that.
You get an immediate kick.
Yeah.
Literally.
No. But
instead of having to practice a form on your own, because remember, you've got to understand that most martial arts were taught sort of 1-to-1 originally, and then only later did they, or taught within close proximities of families and very close societies. They certainly wouldn't have been like 100 people in a class. And when you've got 100 people in a class, now you've got to start doing drills, and you've got to start doing regular exercises, and of course you can afford to lose a few, so once they've paid their membership, you're going to start really pushing them, and of course then you can really apply some effort in the training, because you'll be left with with people who can really train. But unfortunately today there's an awful lot of clubs that start with very few people and end up with no people because they try the same thing, and they get, you may have 3 or 4 people in the class and they're all training like hard as hell, and because there's only 4 of them, they're trying to compete with each other. The next thing you know, one of them comes up and goes, "Oh, that was a great class, let's do that again next week." The other 3 leave. It's the other 3 the instructor should listen to.
No, I enjoy the syllabus work, but if we're looking at creating martial artists and an understanding of what we're doing, obviously we need to start somewhere, right? So that's why we need the syllabus. We need to have that that representation that you can take in movement, you can replicate movement, and eventually the idea is that you will begin to understand the movement that you're doing even more so than you do. But like you said, when you start going up sort of 1st degree, 2nd degree, 3rd degree, 4th degree, there comes a point when it kind of saturates out. Isn't that right? Because
I think so.
And then we're just talking about your experience within the style. I mean, certainly I'm sure there's some ex-students of yourself out there now who are probably 4th degrees, maybe even 5th degrees. And of course, you're a 5th degree. But what they can't take away from you is your experience, throughout your training.
Well, I took my 5th degree in 1990 something.
Right.
So, it's 2019 now?
No, 2020, Steve.
What was it, 2020? Right, okay, yeah. 2009, 2000. Yeah, okay, 2020, yeah, 19. I don't know. I've already explained that I didn't feel the need to take grades, and I know people who are 4th degree. They're absolute. George Shaw got to 4th degree, and my God, he was an amazing individual, a great instructor, and an absolute amazing fighter at the time. And his grades met him. His students rather, they took their gradings because they wanted to get up in the grades and were interested in more than he was, maybe in the traditionalism.
Sure.
And did he care? No. Did they care? No. Because it was what he had to offer and the advice he gave that made them important. He gave them the knowledge. So grades, unfortunately, are overrated in that sense. When you get to that stage,
right?
I think you get to a certain grade, and that's really should be the end of it. But it is a sad fact that it does continue, and not just because of ego, but because of financial constraints or investments and so on, and people want to make more of it. Fear of people becoming higher grades than you.
Right.
No, there's no reason for it except those purposes. It doesn't make you a better martial artist taking a grade. It only tests you to a certain range, and then after that, it should be honourably provided to you. If you have given your all to that style and they can see that you have that capability, there's no reason for them to test you. So only an individual that can watch you train can know that. So your teacher.
Sure.
And so why do you go to a load of unknown people, and certainly why do you go to a panel of strangers who are going to sit there and just make you shake in your boots to do something that you're never going to be capable of simply because of the environment?
Right.
You train hard enough, it won't matter how many people are there eventually, but it's just I think grading should end at a certain point, and loyalty should begin.
Right.
And loyalty works both ways.
Right.
So, and that's how it should be. But yes, I have had a lot of students that have got to certain stages, and of course the worst thing is they then suddenly think that they are They do
Right.
have more information
Yeah.
than you, or they do know more than you, or they shouldn't need to listen to you, but they should now be listening to people with a higher grade or whatever.
I think,
And I pity them.
Yeah, I think the
that's the way it
biggest,
is.
I sort of the biggest problem I think with you that isn't necessarily your problem, but it's the fact that you're very, you're in my mind you're a very 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 traditional person. Now, what that means, it doesn't mean necessarily that, you know, oh, I've got to bow to you and call you Sifu and all this. It's just the character in which you have decided to train and proliferate the martial art. Like you've always made, you know, training, you know, and you've always, you know, taught me when I needed to be taught, told me off when I needed to, and all the rest of it. But I think the problem is you're very casual about it. And you don't
my problem,
assume the role of a Sifu, if you like. You're not sat in a chair. You're not having people, you know, bow at you and tea ceremonies and everything. Not that
we
you
tried that, didn't we?
Yeah,
we tried that. Me sitting in a chair, you having a picture.
it looked all right, but you know, but you wanted, you know, I wanted a tea ceremony. You wanted to go to Starbucks, but you know, but you see what I mean. So when you're presented as you know, there's a lot of preconceptions of a martial art teacher, isn't there, in people's heads? Like you don't really conform to that, but it is. And that's really sad because you really are one of the most technical people I've ever spoken to about martial arts, and you know, and I mean, I know you don't want me, you know, blowing your trumpet, but.
No, I appreciate that. I do appreciate that, and I agree with you.
It's because I've argued with you all the time. What's that for?
Well,
What's that for?
That's exactly why you become prolific and capable in what you're teaching, because you always put yourself up to a challenge. The only problem is people then stop respecting what you know because they think they have all the answers, because you have taught them how to work out the answers. But unfortunately it's never always right. None of us are always right, and what I do on a video tomorrow is not going to be correct by the following year, and people will judge me by that video, which is why I hate making martial arts videos, which is why I never did it, and we've just started doing it now. But you have noticed that I send you the video and then I get you to do it. Which is where all the preconceptions come from.
Well, you know, it's true. But you know, you certainly do help me. But I think the way you've taught me is to be very sort of questioning of martial arts anyway. So but what you've done for me, you've opened up a chasm, if you like. So whereby, and it's like give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. Teaching the fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. And it's just like that's the way I feel like what you've done. Obviously, and the problem, the caveat with that is this: that no matter how intellectual my conclusions about the style I studied, Lao Gar, no matter, you know, what direction I take my own training and whatnot, it can never detract from the experience and the lineage of your teacher. So that's where you need the connection. I need to be linked to you just simply by the lineage. So everything, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, if I come to a conclusion, I'll go, right, okay, that's what I think, Steve. What do you think of this? Blah, blah, blah. No, James, that doesn't work because of this. I go, right, brilliant. You've given me something to think about. If I was to then, you know, take you out the equation, go off and on my own, I'm without that. I'm without that resource and that history, that link to history, the lineage, your teacher. For me, that's the most important thing in martial arts. And for those people without it, I feel
it's a sad thing.
Yeah, it's a very sad thing.
Yeah, the thing is, of course, we can only live a certain lifetime.
Yeah,
and we can only train, you know, while we have that opportunity. The more we train, the more we learn, the more we know, the better for us. So, you know, me as an example, I'm in Canada, my teacher is in the UK, and I no longer have access to that kind of tuition. But the knowledge that I've been given and the genuine, you know, thought I've taken into this a lot of my actual learning has come from teaching students.
Yeah.
Because I've been so prolific in teaching, and when I cannot understand something, I was able to go and learn it and go and understand it and go and ask it. I always remember going to Master Yao and John Russell, who were sitting in John Bright Street, which was a boxing club where we used to do the Brown Sash courses.
Right.
And we had been practicing. It was a Brown Sash course, I remember. And I was a black sash, mind you. I think I was about third degree or something by then.
Yeah.
And it was a Brown Sash course. I used to go to all the Brown Sash courses. Irrelevant. It didn't matter. I used to go to everything.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I went up to them at the end because they'd taught a kick block, number 9 kick block, which requires you to do a back kick and then return, stepping back or stepping behind. Okay, but they showed it in one direction, and when they showed it, after they showed it, I thought, wait a minute, the time I was here before, they did it the other direction.
Yeah.
So I went to them and I said, Master Yao, last time I was here, you did it this way, and this time you're doing it that way. And they just looked at me and said, use your head.
Yeah, point
and
taken.
That taught me, that taught me that it isn't set in stone. It's a requirement that you escape. How do you escape? Whatever's safest, whatever's better.
Yeah.
If you go to a road test or in a driving lesson, and the guy says you're always going to pull over that way, right?
Yeah.
Because the situation is going to be this way, right? And then you get into that situation and there is no way to pull over.
Yeah.
What the hell are you going to do?
You've got to improvise.
Do you know what I mean? You've got to improvise. And you've got to find a way out of that situation. And, that's the teacher isn't going to teach you a specific. He's going to teach you a concept or a way of doing things.
It's at that point, though, you kind of transcend the I was talking about the syllabus earlier on, like the syllabus requirements. That's the point in your training where you transcend syllabus and you begin to understand the concepts of the scientific fighting methods within it.
Yes, the syllabus is merely like a recipe. You understand the recipe, from pretty much then on you can cook anything.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got to apply the same rules. This is important. But if you don't understand those rules, you cannot apply them.
Yeah.
And there are many people out there who have had instructors, good instructors, and people who have left me as well, and have done a variety of things, who think that they understand it, but you can see blatantly when you watch them that they have absolutely no idea what they're doing, and they're making things up, and they're building the way that they do things in a kind of thing. Well, this is A and this is B and this is C, but they can't link the words together. They can't create a word from the letters. If you understand what I'm saying, going back in the concept of ABC. So it is such a sad event to watch how someone could have been really good at one thing but chooses to go and try do different things. Now, you understand people do want to try. I've had loads of people that go out and say, oh, I went to such and such's club last week. I went to this club, that club. How did you feel? And usually it's like, you know what, forget it. And I've had lots of people of very low grades who have gone to clubs and they've gone, oh, the teacher made me spar him and I hit him and beat him up, kind of thing. And you think, why the hell did he do that?
Yeah.
And I've been myself when I was I lived in Milton Keynes for a short while, and I went myself to a karate club because I was driving a truck and this other guy was driving a truck, and we used to meet a lot, and he used to say, why don't you come down my club, come down my club, come down my club? And I'm going, no, you're all right, I'm not really interested in. So I did go down eventually because it was great to jump up and down on benches and exercise and all this sort of thing. And then he says, oh, let's do some sparring. And we did some, I started sparring, and I thought, you know what, you're just, I'm going to pan you, because you're just, you could see the openings, and every time he'd done something, I hit him. And the thing is, he started just getting harder and harder.
Yeah, right.
He started getting more and more aggressive. So as he got more and more aggressive, I started raising my game. So he became so aggressive. He started doing really hard kicks. So all I did was kick his leg from under him. Every time he lifted his leg, I swept him, and he kept on falling on the floor, getting up as fast as he could, and saying, "Go on, more," and I just kept kicking him, and all the way around the room until eventually all his students were watching us fighting, and all the way around this school gym, and I was just kicking his leg from under him every time, and he could not learn from it. He could not cope, and eventually I had to feign that I was tired. I had to say, "Look, I can't go on now. I'll give up. I'm tired," right? And that's a ridiculous thing to do, but it's like I can't embarrass him. He was embarrassed enough in front of his students, and I didn't want to embarrass him. I had to work with the guy, so I'm not sure if I spoke to him again after that. But and there was another time when Rupert kicked me and took my bloody shoulder out for 2 weeks, and he did a nice kick, and I went to congratulate him, and he followed it through with a spinning kick. And then he hit me in the shoulder, and I thought, Jesus Christ, man, you crazy. So, okay. So, fair enough. So I carried on fighting with him, and then I swept him in 6 times in a row. And on the 6th time, he dislocated his shoulder on the floor, because it was a concrete floor.
Wow.
And I thought, you cannot get angry when you're fighting. You have got to train together. And if you don't train together, up the ante by all means.
Absolutely.
But recognise, respect your opponent.
Do you think the ego is such a dangerous thing in martial arts?
Yes, it is.
I mean,
it is. And when they don't lose, they start screaming at the referee to say, "Look at this, look at this." I watched a fight once. I won't name them. Both top fighters, and the one guy, a karate guy, kicked this kung fu guy in the head, and the kung fu guy took no notice. It was fine, just carried on fighting, but then he lost by 1 point or something. Straight away he started pointing at his eye, going, "Look at this, ref, look at this, I'm bleeding, look at this." And it was too late then, right? And you know what, that bloody referee
changed his mind.
Changed it and changed the bloody. That is just no way. That is wrong. So I don't like that. I don't like bad sportsmanship. I really don't. Just take it. It's only a fight, for God's sake. It's only a bloody contest. Let's see. Next time you'll do it well. If you're good enough, you'll come back and you'll beat him.
How much of this attitude do you think you've got towards fighting? It was drilled into you through the martial arts, or how much of it is you?
Oh, it's just me. I think I like fair play, and unfortunately, my wife thinks I'm Asperger's, but
well, you think I'm bipolar.
Well, we'll have to talk about that sometime. So does your wife, James.
Which James do you want?
I don't know how it works. But yeah, she thinks that first of all I've got 2 personalities as well, but yeah, she thinks that I'm Asperger's because I can't tell lies. I end up having to. I'll tell her. I'm not going to tell her about what I've done at work. I'm not going to tell her I made a cock up. I'm not going to tell her. I'm not going to get home and go, "You know what I did at work today?" And I just, it's horrible. It's horrible. And I can hear myself saying it, and I'm going, "Oh no, what have you done? Why did you need to do that?"
Yeah. Oh, but I love that. That's endearing. I love that.
Oh, I delivered some stuff the other day. They'd put it the wrong way around on the truck. They put one pallet on a truck, and which was uptown, and the other one down. The other 2 were for downtown, and the 2 for uptown. I got down to the first one, took 2 off. And I just sat in my truck ready to go, and he goes, comes out, bangs on the window, says, "Oh, these are for uptown. It's for downtown. We need the uptown ones." And I'm going, crap. So I just quickly changed them around, which is fine. I hadn't gone anywhere. I hadn't done anything. Changed them, got down to the other place, delivered theirs, and then told them what I'd done. Why did I need to tell them? I didn't need to tell them. You know what? This time we mentioned we mentioned trucks.
Oh, yeah. No, we did.
Fantastic.
We did. This is where that attitude of yours is, I think, a lot of people who have preconceptions about martial art probably don't appreciate that. People want to believe that martial arts is something that they see in the movies or read about in ancient scripture, and they see the old pictures and the mosaics or whatever, and they conjure up ideas. And then here's Steve Newby. You're rubbish. It's like this.
But I think I was like that too, though. I used to think about martial arts like
course,
that.
So
and
was
then,
I.
But
so
when
was
I became an instructor, I never wanted to be. I wanted to teach. I love teaching, but I didn't want to be an instructor. I didn't necessarily want to become an instructor. It was kind of thrown upon me. I had no choice. Sometimes my teacher would not be there and whatever. And I went, when I moved to Milton Keynes, Alex Barron was running the club. He couldn't make it one time, and everyone looks at me and goes, well, you're teaching it because he's not here and you're the ice grade. So, oh, okay. And I just throw myself into it, and I just am totally involved. And then my teacher would send me to different places. You've got to go there tonight, someone's not turning up, and I would just go and teach.
But that's really interesting, because you trained and you didn't want the recognition. Do you know what I mean? Like you didn't. You just wanted to train, and I'm the same. I joined. I just wanted to train. You were like, James, you want to teach. I want you to teach. You teach, really? Okay, whatever. But
because teaching makes you better.
Yes, it does. But you don't realise that until you start doing it, do you?
That's right. If you watch someone who doesn't teach, they will do the same way as they were learnt it, as they were taught it. And they will not improvise, and they will not develop it, and sometimes they don't even become any more fluid, because you can see they haven't practiced it.
Yeah, sure, because they're too busy thinking about what do I teach next week or whatever. But don't you think that people chasing this sort of this master's title or whatever in martial arts, those are the ones who are missing the point of it. I remember one of your students. Not going to name him, but he had a bit of an attitude with you, and I remember him saying to you something like, "All I want is knowledge and advancement," and I remember thinking. And I remember thinking, hang on a second, if all you want is knowledge and advancement, you've missed the point, because you don't want these things. They just happen. They happen because you train it and because you focus on something, and by default you just get it. It comes to you eventually.
The funny thing about that knowledge and advancement, James, is that he took the club so that he could become knowledge and advancement. So he kind of stole the club and sort of changed the attitudes of the people towards me, because I wasn't going to that club, and so he kind of created himself as the main man, if you like, and
everyone
kind
wants to be the main man, don't they?
They don't have to disrespect other people, and they certainly don't have to disrespect their teacher and convince other people to disrespect their teacher in order to gain knowledge and advancement. And that is what really sort of struck me. I only want knowledge and advancement, but by the way, all my clubs now, I'm going to go and join someone else. Right? Okay, that's okay. If you want knowledge and advancement, you don't want what I've taught you, so leave the clubs and go and learn somewhere else. But no. Oh no, they're my clubs. There, I did this, I did that. No, you didn't. You did nothing. It's an insult. It's one of the biggest insults a student can give you, and we've had a lot of that.
I think that like the relationship of a student teacher is very much like, or in my experience, is very much like a father-son thing. Like you don't always get on with your dad, do you? You have arguments,
that's right.
but at the end of the day, you still love him. So we've had a few crosswords and all the rest of it, but but the one thing I've never done is ever sort of disrespect you to and
you've never gone off and started your own groups and
because
become
I knew where my bread was buttered. See, I knew that whatever I did, I would lose that lineage, if you like, the link to you and the filter in my martial arts, because you never stop learning.
Well, the thing is, what you have been able to do as well, and due to the fact that you've sustained your, if you like, your training and lineage and whatever, is you've maintained that one style, and in respect of that style, you've judged other styles from the point of view of this style. You've been able to judge other styles, and you've been able to come to the conclusion that they haven't got a clue. Because you can see the difference between different styles, and you have a lot of material and a lot of knowledge and experience to be able to be in a position to go to other organizations or other styles and judge them whether they're good or bad, and you can respect them, or you can say, you know what, they don't deserve an ounce of respect, and they are basically ripping people off. And unfortunately, people of a less experience do not know that they're being ripped off, and they are totally. And it is so funny how people act like that, but it's a natural thing.
Well, it's funny when they you know, they're bowing to other people and in search of, do you know what I mean? In search of this authentic martial experience, like, oh, I'm going to leave you, go here. Next thing you know, I want you to be my master. I'm bowing to your master, and all the rest of it. I mean,
they're divorcing their parents.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's just like, you know, what does any of it mean? What are you doing?
It means nothing, because it just makes them look stupid. Because anybody who, you know, leaves the position they're in to go to a new position, they're well aware that they have a certain amount of information and knowledge, and probably know that they have better knowledge than where they are now, but they need recognition, so they desperately need to look for a new source of recognition.
Right.
And they believe that by being there, they're going to get that recognition. Unfortunately, they're going to have to start right from the beginning, if that group means anything at all. Because obviously they know nothing about that group, so therefore they can't know the basics to that group or that concept or that style.
Or whatever,
So unfortunately, you know, anybody will turn around and go, what, you want to join my club? Okay, give me this much money and you can be a black belt if you want. So whatever. Unfortunately for me, I never made any money from it, simply because of the fact that I never thought that. So my first club had 71 children in it. Well, not my first club, but one of my early clubs had 71 children in it, and I never took a penny, and I paid for the hall and for the advertising for the girl that was teaching it. I had absolutely no concept of, wait a minute, I should be having that money and then giving her some money for teaching. I didn't even consider that, and that's how stupid I was in the early days. And had I have not been that stupid and more fool me, I would not be sitting, you know, where I am now. Well, but then again, who knows about life? You know, it takes you in all sorts of directions. But I do enjoy, and I've said this before, I do enjoy going to the summer course, and I did enjoy going to the summer course, and going up to a group that I was asked to teach, and they're all standing there shaking in their boots as I walk up with my big black sash on and my tunic and everything, and walk up with a serious face. And then, you know, they're all just waiting for me to tell them what to do and so on. And I just look at them and say, my name is Steve, and you must call me Steve. and they just relax at that minute. They relax, and then by the end of that lesson, by the end of that 40 minutes it takes, they are all over the place. They're loving it, absolutely loving it, and I love the way they do that.
That's but I mean, that's a very sort of, if I don't know. Do you think that's a Chinese sort of, like a family style, if you like, learning in a nice, in a good environment where you're not afraid? No,
I don't think they ever. It's a nice way of learning when you're happy to learn.
Right.
And then people would argue, wait a minute, you can't be happy when you're learning to fight because you've got to fight. Yeah, there is time and a place.
You've got to switch
it
on
and off. You know what I mean? You've got to switch. Yeah, you've got to be able to switch it on and off. Otherwise, you'll be serious. I mean, can you imagine going to a party with someone touches you and you just smack them? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, sorry, I forgot to switch off.
Yeah.
No, you've got to be a human first.
Yeah.
And a antagonist, if you like, second,
Yeah.
if that's the word, because you have got to punish
Yeah.
the guy that takes your humanity or attempts to take your humanity away. So punish them for it, but don't punish every other human that lives with you because of it, or works with you, or trains with you.
That's it. If you want to, if you're trained to be a hammer, you start seeing everyone as nails, and you can't go.
Yeah,
that's
yeah. When I went to Scotland for the first time,
yeah.
I was asked to go up to Scotland by the Scottish, and I met them all by the Forth Road Bridge in a hotel.
Yeah.
And I just says to them all, I said, I'm here to help you build Scotland. I didn't come here and say, I didn't go to them and say, this is who I am, this is what I want you to do, and this is how we're going to do it.
Right.
But that is how I should have done it.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I went, I'm here to help you make Scotland great, make Scotland big. And we did. We built a really good organisation, but God, did it take some fighting to do it.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, had I have done that,
you were too nice.
But
you were too benevolent.
I'm not the master.
Yeah.
I'm not.
But it's not your. You don't want to be the master. But I would argue anyone who seeks the title and wants to be called master has no place or does not warrant that. Only the title of master, I really believe, should be bestowed on you by your students, by your peers, out of respect for you, not because you demand it. And and it's like you've never once with me ever insisted I call you this or call you that, and and I think that's all. But like we discussed, that was probably to your detriment, because you look at some styles of martial art which are very regimented. You can always use karate as an example, but even like taekwondo in this modern day, it's so regimented. It's sir, it's ma'am, it's yes sir, and they don't stand. They sit on the floor cross-legged. And yes, but this is my point, because it's so regimented and so controlled, and everybody lives with this. It's better to be feared than loved sort of mentality. They're afraid to ask questions. They're afraid to question their instructor and argue a point. Once
bit like North Korea, really, James?
Yeah, absolutely. But but you see what I mean? It's like you're not developing martial artists, then you're developing automatons.
Well, this is it, James. You can't. If you're teaching people honestly and you're honest in your teaching, then you have to open that up for them to learn. If you enclose them in this kind of, or enclose yourself, if you like, you can hide anything. And that's the problem. That's what most of these kind of groups are hiding. Now, I'm not suggesting all of them, because some of them have just been brought up that way, but become good martial artists and good teachers. But the majority of people who tend to teach like that always have something that they cannot know, but they cannot show.
Right.
They do, they're hiding, the cracks in their armor for fear that it will be broken into. And I know that fear, because it's happened to me so many times, because I haven't got cracks in my armor. I've got bloody great holes.
Yeah.
And that's what makes me vulnerable to criticism and students questioning. But I want good students with good questions. I don't want bad students with, bad attitudes.
Yeah.
So, that's the difference, really. So you can always find, and then you just say, well, I'd love teaching these students. And at the end of the day, you can trust people until you can no longer trust them.
Yeah.
If you go around not trusting everybody all the time, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's partially the problem that the BKFA has had in the end, that, understandably, you can't trust everybody because of the reputation and the situations that have occurred over the years. You try to hold a tight ship, but eventually you've got to give it away.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, it can't grow anymore, and it became too big for its own abilities, and it's kind of in that sense, kind of disintegrated into all sorts of different segments.
Yeah, sure.
And those segments are not thinking on the same lines. But that's the same with all associations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can never detract from the history, which I think is important. But to understand the history and learn a lesson from it is one thing, you know.
Yeah.
But to move forward and not acknowledge, you know, problems within an organisation is another, you know. But well, I think, you know, we've certainly droned on a lot.
Yeah, we have, haven't we?
It's been a long one, hasn't it? Honest to God.
I don't know.
Yeah,
it's time.
God, we're coming up to about 1 hour 50 minutes.
Jesus Christ, James! Who's going to listen to this?
Nobody. They're probably all asleep. Either that, or they've died from the pandemic by now.
Yeah.
But,
well, I have to say, with the time here in sunny Canada, it's 6:22 p.m. What time is it there?
It's 22 minutes past 1.
In the morning.
Yeah, in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah, our time has gone forwards, has it now?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Is it forwards or backwards?
Yeah, no, it's gone forwards because normally it's 8 hours difference. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Steve, thank you so much for having a chat with us again, and it did get quite heavy there, but hopefully you kind of got something from that. I don't know.
We're kind of opening up a little bit, aren't we? We're opening up and telling and breaking in our little, breaking into our little own characters and personal lives. And
well, that's that. But that's to me.
What's wrong with that?
No, nothing. Anyway, guys, thanks a lot for joining us on another episode of the Kung Fu Podcast. My name's James Still, and I'm, as ever, joined by my teacher, Mr. Steve Newby, and we shall see you again. Take care, everybody. Steve, you going to say goodbye?
Oh.
You got to say goodbye.
I was listening to you, James. I was listening to you.
Right, okay. So this is your cue.
Yeah. Goodbye, everybody. Have a nice day. Yes.
See you guys. Take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
I kick your little Beijing ass right now, man. I ain't scared of you. I know you know that little tricky shit. Come on.
Hi guys, thanks so much for joining us on the Kung Fu Podcast. If you like that and you want to find out more about us, you can head over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram or YouTube and find us under SJN Martial Arts. And also guys, this podcast is available on Podbean and iTunes. So until next time, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you again on the Kung Fu Podcast.
Guns. Now, why doesn't somebody pull off 45 and bang, settle it?
No guns.